Everyone wants to work here. How would it feel if you and your team could say that and mean it? Do they? Have they ever? If so, why would they say that? And if not, why not? These are questions we all need to think about as leaders. And today, you can begin thinking about it and have better answers to that question about why is it and how would they and what we can do as a leader to make that so. Welcome to another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively, make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. If you're listening to this podcast, you could have been here with us live, or you could be with us live for future episodes on your favorite social media channel. You can get those info about those and times and dates for those live episodes, and therefore interact with us sooner, get this information sooner, and get smarter sooner by joining our Facebook or LinkedIn groups. And just go to remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. And then we'll look forward to seeing you live on a future episode. Today's episode is brought to you by our latest book, The Long Distance Team, Designing a Team for Everyone's Success. You can learn more, get an excerpt and more by going to longdistanceteambook.com. That's longdistanceteambook.com. And without any further ado, let me bring in our guest, and I will introduce Maura Thomas to you. Maura Neville Thomas is an award-winning speaker and trainer on individual and corporate productivity and work-life balance, and the most widely cited authority on attention management. Her proprietary empowered productivity system has been embraced by companies like NASA, Google, and Dyson. She's a TEDx speaker, founder of Regain Your Time, author of 6 books, and was named a top leadership speaker in Inc. magazine. She's frequently featured in major business outlets like Business Insider, Fast Company, The Washington Post. She's a regular contributor in Forbes and the Harvard Business Review, and her articles there have been viewed over 1 million times. Today, we're talking about her newest book. I think it's the newest one. Here it is. Everyone wants to work here, attract the best talent, energize your team, and be the leader in your market. And Maura, I'm so glad that you are here. We were talking when you got here about this not being your first time on the show.
It is not. It is. I feel like we've done a whole bunch of things together. You have so much going on. You're such a great example, Kevin, of leadership and of entrepreneurship. And I'm thrilled to be back again. Thank you.
So I did look it up, and I couldn't believe that this will be episode number 392 of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Maura was with me first on episode 21 in November of 2016. So we'll put that link in the show so you can go back and watch. You won't watch, you'll only listen to that back at that time, but we'd love to have you do that. So Maura, so glad to have you. I'm looking forward to talking about this new book. And we've got someone here from Austin.
Hey, Steve.
I bet that's someone you know.
It is somebody I know. Steve is also an amazing entrepreneur and speaker and expert. And actually, he's probably someone you should have on the show.
Well, we probably should have that conversation at some point. But for right now, we're going to talk about this great new book and some of the ideas in it. But before we do that, actually, let's do this. Tell us a little bit about the journey. You didn't wake up deciding you're going to be the queen of productivity. You didn't wake up when you were 5 and decide that anyway. What led you to all this stuff? And why did productivity find you, I suppose would be the way I'd ask it.
Yeah. So the question about productivity and the question about entrepreneurship are very much intertwined. My first job out of college was for a company that sold planners, paper-based planners, and training. And basically taught people how to be more productive. The company's called Time System International. It still exists in the US. I believe they had the best process. And shout out the trainer and speaker there at the time when I joined as a 22-year-old was David Allen, King of Productivity. I will accept your title of queen, even, but
well, I just bestowed it upon you. So
I learned so much from David Allen, and then Dr. Valerie Young, who created some curriculum after that. And so anyway, I worked there for 10 years, learned so much about helping people be productive. And then when I left, I had a brief stint at another job and decided, like, you know what, being an employee is really not my jam. And so started to think about how can I, what kind of skills and wisdom do I have that are worth something to people? And the answer very clearly was
10 years, right?
productivity, right? Productivity, helping people be more productive, because part of my job there was to learn what everyone else was teaching about time management and productivity. And so I had to read all the books and see all the speakers and go to all the classes and do everything. So I had this unbelievable wealth of knowledge about productivity. And so that's where it all began in 2003. It's been, my business just celebrated 20 years in business.
We're about to celebrate 30 years. In fact, when this goes live, we'll be in the month where we will be celebrating 30 years. Now, I call you the queen of productivity. I mean, I think that's most people that know you would know you in that realm. And yet this book is different. This book is really more about us as leaders. And you say that this is a book about knowledge work and for knowledge workers. So let's just start there. Why is that? Why is that where you focused? And how would you define that?
Yeah. So knowledge work, I think, is generally defined as people whose job outputs are primarily brain functions, right? People who sit at a computer and use what they know to do their work, right? So if you see patients, if you're a doctor, if you're a first responder, firefighter, right, then you work with patients all day. And of course, that is all knowledge work also. But you have something that you can touch and count at the end of the day, right? I was on patrol. I kept the city safe. I saw this many patients. I put out fires, right? If you are a knowledge worker, your job outputs are very intangible things that you cannot touch or count. They're things like relationships and ideas and solutions to problems and strategic thinking and creative insights. And so it's really hard for people who are in those kinds of jobs. Most people can have long-term productivity metrics for that. Did I make my quota? Did we serve this many customers, right? But on a day-to-day basis, how do you know if you were productive?
It's hard for many people to figure that out.
It is. And really the answer is, do you feel productive, right? If you ended the day going, oh my gosh, I got a lot of important stuff done today, then that was probably a very productive day, but you're really the only one who can measure that on a day-to-day basis. And what I have discovered working with clients and leaders is that often the biggest obstacle to people having that day where they say, oh my gosh, that was such a good day, I got so much done, is their boss and the behavior and the culture of the company.
Wait a minute. I'm a boss now, so you just be careful. Don't be too mean too early. Now, I will give you all one of Kevin's productivity strategies. So here it is. So obviously I read a lot. I read a lot anyway, but every week I'm doing this and I'm reading all the books on it. I'm doing another one tomorrow and I'm reading that book right now for tomorrow. So here's the thing. A lot of people say, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get right into the book. Now I'm going to read the table of contents first. I'm going to do that. I think it's a good strategy, but then I always read the stuff, the front matter, like the pages that don't have page numbers, or in the case of this book, the pages that have Roman numerals. In fact, the first thing we're going to talk about is on page Roman numeral 10. I guess that's X. I'm going to read you something from this, Maura, because it really is, I think, it's the starting point of the book. It's going to be the starting point of our conversation. So here's what you wrote. It's in big words right up here. Most leaders are unaware of how much impact their everyday behaviors have on the organizational culture and how seemingly innocent decisions can negatively impact the lives of their employees.
Yes.
Comment?
Yes.
Other than yes.
I spend a lot of time with leaders recognizing, as you do, I know, but recognizing what's often the biggest recognition to me is how much leaders underestimate how much influence they have. Not only on their employees' work lives, which I think if you say that, like you're a boss, you have influence on your employees' work lives, no kidding, but on their personal lives, on their attitude when they go home and interact with their family, and therefore on their family, on their communities, on the world.
On their mental health, we could go right on down the line. In fact, one of the things
Physical
I
health,
often say to people is,
attitude.
you're a person and you look yourself every day in the mirror and you think you're looking at yourself in the mirror, but when you get to work, people aren't looking at you just as you, they're looking at you as the boss.
That's
And
right.
that changes everything,
Yeah.
right? It changes everything.
Here's the analogy that I think really drives the point home for most people. Just because you are the boss, you are like the cop in the rearview mirror when you are driving down the highway. If you're driving down the highway and a police officer pulls up behind you, no sirens, nothing, they're just driving behind you. Aren't you hyper aware of everything in that moment until you want to know, how fast am I going? Is my blinker on? Am I swerving? Hang up the phone, turn down the radio. Like, what you
You
want to
are all
know.
in with driving at this moment.
You are all in on driving in that moment. And that is the effect that leaders have on their employees just with their presence.
Yeah. And people are watching us, even if they're not aware that they're watching us. And oh, by the way, it's not just watching, because they don't have to be in the same physical space. We don't have to be in physical proximity. Like my team, no one's here and they're paying attention too, right? You are, after all, the queen of attention management, and they are paying attention, right? I mean, I dubbed you the queen of two things now today. So somewhere in the book, I didn't find it in the last minutes here before I was getting ready, but you talk about 4 kinds of work, and you talk specifically about one of those kinds of work that we don't do enough of, which I agree with you 140%. What are the 4 kinds, and what's the one we're not as leaders doing enough of?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is the 4 quadrants, which I reference in my latest book, Everyone Wants to Work Here, but it actually comes from an earlier book, Attention Management. It's the 4 quadrants of attention management for productivity. And the quadrant, and it's oversimplified, but I think it really helps people explain. And you can think of them as sort of mental states. So the 4 quadrants are reactive and distracted, focused and mindful, daydreaming, and flow. And we are typically in one of those 4 states roughly throughout our day. And none of them are good or bad on their own. The quadrant model is really designed to make you think more often, which quadrant am I in right now? And is that quadrant going to produce the best results for this moment? Right. And the
So that
answer,
isn't what I was asking about, but I
oh,
love that you share that, because I do remember those quadrants.
okay.
So Kevin has stumped the author because he asked a bad question. No, you talked about there are 4 kinds of work. At least that's what I'm recalling, and I couldn't. That's why I said I couldn't find it this morning. And we do work, like we process email is one of the things that we do, and we solve problems. But the one that you said we don't spend enough time on is thinking.
Yes, got it. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Let's think about thinking for a second.
Yeah.
Um, this might be obvious, but why don't we spend enough time as leaders thinking? And how is that impacting whether we're getting our teams to have any time to do any thinking?
Yeah. I think that as we behave in the book, I talk about unconscious calculations. And unconscious calculations are things that we behave in a way that suggests that we believe a thing, but we haven't actually examined that thing and whether or not we actually believe it. So one of our unconscious calculations, to me, observing people, I think most people behave as if they believe that stopping to think is a luxury that I can't afford. I just don't have time for that. There's too much going on.
I got this list.
right? I got this list. I got stuff to do. I got all these emails coming in. I got all these text messages, these chats coming in. I got all the phone rings. Who has time to think? Or the thought is, well, I do have this thoughtful work. I'll just have to do it when nobody's bothering me, because during my work day is certainly too distracting to do that. So I'll have to do it when nobody's bothering me. But the only time nobody's bothering you is evenings, weekends, holidays, early morning, right? Time when you're supposed to be taking care of yourself and your family, not when you're supposed to be working. So right? So the thing I talk to leaders about is, what if we could create an environment where your team could get their most important work done at work during their workday, instead of behaving as if they believe that I can't really do actual thoughtful work during the workday. That has to wait until when it's quiet, which is usually 11 o'clock at night.
I can't do any thinking because I'm in a meeting. That's a whole other conversation, right? So, and then here's the other part. So I don't have time to think. I don't have the luxury to think. But
That's
then unconscious calculations, right? I walk down the hall, if there is a hall. I walk down the hall and I see someone and they're not typing. And I think, what are they doing?
Yeah. They're not typing, they're not talking, they're not on the phone, there's nobody in there with them. They're just kind of sitting there like this. And you think to yourself, guess they don't have enough work to do. They're not doing anything, right? Either at worst, you have that disparaging thought, like they're slacking off. At best, you think, oh, now's a good, they're in between things. Now's a good time to interrupt them.
Which is that's where I was going to go, because then if even if we really do believe we want them to have time to think, and like even if we're ahead of the curve that you're talking about us being on, and when we see that, then we feel like that's the time we could interrupt, when we'd almost in some ways be better off interrupting when they were typing and saying, hey, when have you got a sec, rather than when they're doing this. And that might be the most valuable thing they could be doing. And you and I could have the conversation about we can't multitask, we switch task. And if we switch them out of that mode because we unintentionally ask them a question in that moment, they may never get back there where they were quite the same way. We all have been there.
Totally. There is a cost to that switch, right? Every time you switch what you're doing, and the cost is summed up by the phrase or some version of the phrase that we ask ourselves 1,000 times a day. Where was I? Where was I? What was I saying? What were we talking about? What was I doing? Why did I walk into this room? Right? Where was I? We say that's the cost right there. That's the cost of task switching, because either it takes you forever to get back, but you'll never get back, like you said, exactly where you were, or you just never get back there and you just move on.
So, which takes us to what I consider, my grandmother notwithstanding, to be the most dangerous 4-letter word in the English language: busy.
Mm,
So let's talk about productive versus busy, because it's connected to what we're talking about here, right? So
mhm.
talk about these two words. One is your favorite, one is not.
Yeah. So most people end their days saying to themselves, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. I was busy all day and somehow I got nothing done. Right. And it is like my mission in the world to help people end their days instead saying, oh my gosh, that was such a good day. I got so much done. Now, and here's the difference. The difference is, yes, you were busy all day. You went to the meetings, you read the emails, you picked up the phone, you answered all the chats, you talked to all the people who walked into your office, whether that's your colleagues at work or your family at home or your dog or your cat walking across your your computer keyboard, right? You dealt with all of that. You were busy all day, you did a million things. But at the end of the day, and all of those things probably you kind of had to do, right? You can't ignore your email. You can't not go to the meetings all the time, right? So you were doing important things that needed to get done. But at the end of the day, it feels like they add up to nothing, because nobody goes home at the end of the day and says, it was such a good day. I read like 200 emails. It was amazing. I feel awesome, right? Nobody says that. What you say is, I checked those important things. I got those proposals out. I finished that article. I finished that presentation. I, revamped the strategy. I, solved the problem, right? Those are the things that make you go, oh my gosh, that was amazing. I feel great. and we don't have enough.
100%. Yeah. So yeah, busy doesn't have anything to do with productivity, really. And here's my other problem with the word busy. If I say to you, not to you, but to the normal person, like, man, I was really busy, and they're like, oh yeah, me too. And it's like an excuse. It becomes a societally safe excuse.
Not only, even worse, I think it becomes a badge of honor. I think that, again, another unconscious calculation, right? The busy we are, the more important we are, the more, needed we are, the more, and everybody needs to feel needed. And I get that, but busy is stressful. I mean, the definition of the word productive in the dictionary is the one that I use to guide my work, and it means achieving significant results. So at the end of the day, if you feel like you did significant things, then I think that counts as productive.
So there's productive, and productivity then basically adds the other piece of that, which is in how much time did it take, right? And then it's the time piece, which busy doesn't address either, right? So very true. So as I was reading this book, I guess probably not surprisingly, because I've read and followed your work, and every time we've chatted, whether others were listening or not, it feels like we've always been pretty much simpatico in terms of a lot of the things that we think about. But I continue to think about how many of the things that you're talking about here are things that we talk about and that we do as well. And one of the things that you mentioned in here is the idea that it's not about the tool, it's about how we use the tool. And I think especially for us as leaders, that's important, because early in the pandemic, everyone was coming to us because we wrote this book called The Long Distance Leader that said, what tools should we be using? I said, just quit looking for new ones and use the ones you got better, regardless of what ones you got, right? So talk about what you mean by that when you say it's not just the tools, but how we use them specifically as it relates for us as leaders, what we need to be doing in terms of using them better.
Yeah, I think we only think about the technical aspects of using a tool, right? We introduce a tool and then we teach our team how to use the tool, right? If you click here, this happens. And if you click there, that happens. And here's how you create a new chat. And here's how you do this or that, right? But what we really need to think about is, for example, so many companies these days, they're rolling out Teams, right? We have Teams now. Teams has chat, it has DM, it has meetings, it has all this kind of stuff, right? And so you know how to use it, right? I mean, it's just like any other tool that you've been using, you know how to use it, right? And then we just leave people to their own devices. But what companies and leaders need to say is, okay, so we had email and we had text message and we have phone calls. And now we also have chat. And so which one are we going to use in which situation? How are we going to use these differently? What is our strategic communication plan that we all agree on? This is how things are going to happen. They don't do that. And as a result, people are left to their personal preference. And so now I'm on a team with 7 different people, and Kevin likes chat, and Lisa likes meetings, and Joe likes email, and somebody else likes phone calls. And I can't remember all that. So I'm just going to send everything I need to tell you guys in all the ways. And
Yeah,
so,
or I'm just going to go do one I like, and you're going to have to figure it out from me, right?
yes.
Either way, and neither way is the right answer, right?
Right.
100%. It's so very true. And all the research says, and said this forever, that 80% of people use 20% of the tool. So there's how are we going to socialize and agreements we're going to set around them. And there's also situations where we may have a need that one of the tools we have could help us with if we actually figured it out. So there's figuring out that technical piece, but the socializing of it and the way we actually use it and integrate it into our culture is so very important. And when we don't do it is the source of so much frustration, right?
It is. And it causes an even bigger problem. And that is that the volume of communication in organizations is way higher than it needs to be. And because we have all these different methods of communication.
You need to say that again, because there's some people that are going to disagree with you before you finish. So
Okay.
Say that again, and then I'll let you finish.
Okay. The volume of communication is too high. in most organizations. Most teams are drowning each other in text and email and phone call and meetings, not maliciously, but because the only way to get the information that people need to do their jobs is to ask someone else. Because maybe it exists in somebody's inbox somewhere, maybe it exists in that long chat thread somewhere, but who has time to find that? So I just need to ask you. And I know I've asked you 17 times before, but I need to ask you again because I don't know where it lives. It's buried in my inbox somewhere. I can't do my job until I get the information I need to do my job. And the only way to get that information is to ask somebody else by some method. And I'm going to use all the methods because I don't know which one you're looking at. So I'm going to chat you and say, hey, I just sent you an email.
Yeah.
Right?
Or yes.
Yeah. It's a problem.
Did you get my email? Like you're
Yeah.
calling somebody, right? So, which goes to another issue around how we agree. We like to talk about agreements about how we're going to communicate, expectations, agreements around like not only when do we use which tool, but what's a reasonable time before I need to be like if I really need something in an hour in our organization, you're not going to send an email.
Right.
Because that's not going to be in fact, you're not going to send very many emails between us and our organization. There's certain situations, but it's relatively small. But if it is, you're not expecting that someone's going to reply to you in the next 30 minutes because that's not our expectation of each other.
Because you haven't determined how you're going to communicate as a team. That's exactly right. And so the problem is most companies send an email like system generated, automated. Here's a thing that happens 17 times a day that you get notified about. Or I need this thing in 5 minutes. You better drop everything and get it to me. Or anything in between. An email could be any of those things. And the only way that you can know which of those things it is to look at it and read it.
And that means you're looking at it all day long,
all
which
day
doesn't
long.
give you the chance to get any meaningful work done.
I call it a culture of urgency in the book. And you
do?
got to reset your culture of urgency. I spend a lot of my time, as it sounds like you do as well, helping organizations reset their culture of urgency and to figure out how does work flow through the company. One of the chapters in the book talks about how does work flow through your department, through your organization? And the answer for most people is, I don't know, I just get, 87 emails every day and I just answer those the best I can. And that's how I get my job done. And some of them have tasks and I do the tasks, and some of them, and then I put a flag on it and I get back to it later. And some of them, right. That is chaotic and haphazard, not systematic. And fixing that will go a long way. And one of the goals that we work toward with my clients is everybody on your team should be able to, not that they need to, but that they should be able to put their head down and do their work without talking to anybody else for days at a time. Now, again, I'm not saying that nobody should talk to anybody else for days at a time, but I'm saying that if you could operate that way, that's how you know that your company is running efficiently. And then you can be very intentional with how you spend meeting time, for example, and what you do when you get the remote team together, and how is your time together? How is your synchronous communication very efficient and very intentional?
So one of my favorite kinds of synchronous communication that I don't think we talk about nearly enough, especially as leaders, is our one-on-ones. And you spend some time in the book talking about one-on-ones. So what advice would you have for us as leaders to make our one-on-ones more effective? Your words, effective and intentional. Give us a couple of tips there before we start. There's so much stuff I would love to talk to you about, but let's do this, and then we'll start to move into the back quarter of the conversation.
Okay. And I would love to hear your additions to this because I know that you have many, but a few that I talk about in the book are a lot of times leaders use their one-on-ones as time to catch up. What's the status of this? And what's the status of that? And how's that going? You should be able to know that asynchronously. Any leader should be able to know the status of any project at any time by looking at whatever tool you're using to track that, whether it's the CRM or the project management tool or whatever it is. So don't use your one-on-one time for that. Instead, use your one-on-one time for coaching and mentoring. So ask open-ended questions like, what kind of problems did you run into this week? What frustrated you the most this week? How did you solve that? How did that go? And if you ask them those open-ended questions and then just be quiet and listen, you learn so much about how the department operates and how, the pulse of the team member and how they're feeling and what's frustrating them. And then you can celebrate their wins. Good for you. Knew you could do it. You can empathize with their losses. Like, well, it sounds like you made the best decision you could in the moment. Didn't go very well. We want to avoid that. Like, it was a mistake. We want to avoid that in the future, but I think you gave it your best shot. I understand. It's happened to me. I hate it when that happens. Empathize. But also importantly, what did you learn from that situation? Whether it was a win or not a win, right? Whether it was a swing and a miss, what did you learn? And underscoring those lessons. And then after all that, the last piece of that is be the mentor, but mentor in hindsight. Don't give people the answers up front. Tell them, I trust your judgment. You've got this. Let them make their own decisions. And then when you debrief on the back end, oh, it sounds like it went well. It sounds like it didn't go so well. Here's another thing you can try next time. Here's the thing that I've learned in my experience works pretty well. There's another, tool for your toolbox. That's a better way to use one-on-ones. And I'm sure you have questions.
I'm just going to add one thing.
Yeah.
Before we do that, here's the way I think about them. Let's talk about the non-work. Then let's talk about what you have that you need from me, and then what I need from you. So in other words, the way I think of it is the non-work, your list, my list, but not necessarily status, but all the stuff you've just talked about. But I would lay on the top of that, on the front end of that chance. And the way you've described it, some of that will come out, but it might not unless you're very intentional about it. That's why I like to make that first.
I love that roadmap. It's always nice to set a roadmap and agenda at the beginning. And I love yours as a model for that.
So anyway, there's so many things we could have talked about this wonderful book. Everyone wants to work here. And if you want people to say that and mean it, then you need to read this book. There's so many things we could have talked about. Is there anything that you wished I would have asked that I didn't?
I just really want to underscore that the impact that leaders have at home. Research shows that just the expectation that someone might receive a message from their boss after hours stresses them out. Just that they might receive an email from their boss after hours stresses them out. Because here's what that's like. It's like, Kevin, if you're my boss and at the end of the day, you say to me, hey, Maura, go home, have a great night with your family. I'm going to want to tell you a thing later. I mean, don't worry about it. It won't be important.
Well, first of all, don't do that anyway, because they immediately see that's negative, right?
Right? That's what I'm saying.
Let me give you some feedback on Monday. No, don't do that.
Right. But that's basically what you're saying. I know my boss sent me an email. I don't know what it says, but I sure as heck want to know what it says. Is it good? Is it bad? Am I in trouble? Is it a huge new thing that's going to be dumped on my plate? What is it? I need to know. It doesn't matter if you say, no, don't worry about this till tomorrow. If you're telling me something, I want to know what it is. And not only does it stress out the employee, it stresses out the employee's whole family. Because now instead of being present at dinner, watching a movie, playing a game, going out for a walk, doing what, coaching Little League, doing whatever you're doing with your family, you're reading emails from your boss.
Well, or you're wondering about the email. And even if you don't know you're going to get one or not, but if you sometimes get them,
then you think
it's
you're
like,
right.
oh, I better check.
That's right.
We could have a long conversation about that. Everybody, just make sure you know how, if you are going to work as a leader after hours, and I'm not going to judge that. We could have a conversation about that. By all means, learn how to use delay delivery.
You can do it on iPhone too. I blow people's mind when I show them how to hold down that little arrow button and the send tomorrow at 8 a.m. pops up. Check that out.
Yep. It's about 3 clicks in Outlook, depending on where you have it set up in Outlook, but know how to do that. Google it when you leave. That's the first thing you all can do when you leave here. So a couple more questions for you, Maura, what do you do for fun?
Oh, lately I've been playing pickleball. I have totally, it's a cliche. Everybody's doing it now. And I am right there with them. It is so much fun. I'm loving it. I have league tonight. I'm very excited.
Playing the pickleball tonight. Okay, so now the only thing you absolutely knew I was going to ask you was this: what are you reading these days?
Yes, at this very moment, I am reading, no surprise if you know me, a book. So, one of the people who I get a lot of my research from, her name is Gloria Mark. She's at UC Irvine. She's a professor of informatics, and she researches how technology distracts us. And her latest book came out recently, and it's called Distraction. And that's what I'm reading.
Distractions by Gloria Mark. We'll have it in the show notes, everybody. But if you stop this and said it, you'd go get it without going to the show notes. So thank you for that, Maura. Where can we learn more about you, about this great new book? Where do you want to point us?
Yeah, and my website is the source for everything, maurathomas.com. /books has the books, /inquire if you want to talk about how I might be able to help you, /subscribe if you want to know when I publish articles in Forbes, HBR. But maurathomas.com is the place to start.
MauraThomas.com, MAURA Thomas.com. You need to do that. Now, question that I have for all of you, it's the same question I ask you all every single week. It might be my favorite question. Now what? What are you going to do now? You just listened. You were busy listening for the last 40 minutes. But what will you do next is where the productivity will come. Like, what action will you take as a result? And maybe it's thinking differently about the communication you have with your team, about the tools that you use. Maybe you're going to change the way you do your one-on-ones. Maybe you're going to start having one-on-ones. Those were just a couple of the many things that you might have taken from the last 35 minutes. I hope that you found this useful, but I hope far more that you take some action based on what you just heard. So, Maura, thank you for being here. I've been looking forward to it ever since you sent me the book. I'm so glad to have had the chance to chat with you again and learn from you again.
Ditto, Kevin. It's been my honor. Thanks very much for having me.
Everybody, if you like this, tell someone else to come join us next week. Tell someone to go find this episode or episode 21, the first time Maura was on, when we dove directly in to productivity. Heck, I don't remember what we talked about that day, but I know it was awesome. And I don't know what we're talking about next week, but I promise you it'll be great, and it will help you become the remarkable leader you were born to be. Right here next week, every week, the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. Like, share, you know what to do wherever you're listening. Do that, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.